Thank you for joining us for the 7th season of Inside the Dancer's Studio, where we bring listeners like you closer to the creative process. Celebrating a decade of rigorous play and positive failure, NCCAkron is an incubator and hub for dance research and development and serves as a connector, a catalyst, and a cultural matchmaker. Inside the Dancer's Studio is recorded as an ongoing documentation practice with NCCAkron visiting artists. In this episode, NCCAkron's Executive Artistic Director Christy Bolingbroke enters the studio with Minneapolis, Minnesota-based Aparna, Ranee, and Ashwini Ramaswamy of Ragamala Dance Company. Together, they reflect on Bharatanatyam lineage, artistic rigor, and the layered practice of making work rooted in South Indian traditions and contemporary life.
I'm thrilled to be welcoming a few NCCAkron artist alumni to our latest edition of Inside the Dancer's Studio. So let's get right to it. Hello, Ashwini, Ranee, and Aparna. How are y'all today?
We're doing
Good.
great.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello.
Happy to be here.
Yay. Maybe for our listeners' benefit, I would love to invite each of you to share your voice and introduce yourself so they know who they're hearing as we continue our conversation.
This is Aparna Ramaswamy. It's nice to be here with you.
Hi, I'm Ashwini Ramaswamy, and I believe this is my 4th trip to Akron since 2019.
I'm Ranee Ramaswamy and a co-founder and co-artistic director of Ragamala Dance Company.
I mean, we have a family, I don't want to use this word lightly, dynasty in some regards too, and excited to understand what it is to navigate a creative career. Because you have been performing and making work together and separately. And a lot of our listeners are burgeoning artists, fellow students, academics, other choreographers who all in this choose your own adventure that we call being an artist in the United States are trying to figure out how we maintain longevity and find a way forward. I'd love to start by asking you, and it probably is a different answer for each of you. When did you first say you wanted to be a choreographer?
I would say when I came from India in 1978, I was 26 years old and I had studied dance when I was a young child and until about 17 years old. And there was no scope for me to continue dancing because in India, that was not something families expected their daughters to do. So I came here as a wife and a mother, but with the knowledge of Indian classical dance. And I had to first make up a piece to dance because the Indians in Minneapolis were only about 100 Indians, people from India, asked me if I would perform for Diwali. And I thought, well, I have to choreograph something. That word didn't exist in my vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
And I called my mother in India and I said, Amma, I have to choreograph. And she was nervous. She was afraid, what am I going to do? Because choreography is not taken lightly.
Mm-hmm.
In India, the dancer studies with the teacher for years. And then later on, automatically starts to create piece for her own body because it's a solo form. So nobody calls themselves choreographer. It's a much later word that was added, I think, mirroring the West. So usually you are a performer, you are a dancer.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't say I'm a dancer choreographer because if you are a dancer who's dancing professionally, it's understood that you're also a choreographer and you choreographed your own body.
Especially as a solo practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was my first attempt. But I was like, for years, I would be not comfortable to call myself a choreographer. And I think talking to Aparna as we grew together, that it's okay. We had to say this word, but she also constantly, when in her conversations, would talk about how a dancer is not considered a choreographer. A choreographer is a dancer is a choreographer. But it automatically became the term choreographer as I started to create pieces for myself, for others, for my company members, for other dancers. So now it has become a very common word for me, but it was a difficult word to digest.
Mm-hmm. And so, Aparna, when did you first say, I'm a choreographer?
So I will continue on with what Ranee is saying, is that word also has made me very uncomfortable because it felt like it had to be a very conscious shift from being a dancer to being a dancer / choreographer. Whereas in our tradition, there is no word choreographer. I much prefer the term practitioner. And so when I was young and studying dance, and then we met our incredible teacher, she was a dancer and it encompassed everything. And so she knows music and poetry and she creates dance for herself. And then when you teach others, your teacher creates dances for you. You don't label it as choreography. And what I find ironic about it is in the West, we often have to speak and explain to people that our pieces are all original creations. And in Bharatanatyam, they are original creations and not handed down through generations.
Yep.
But yet we don't have the term choreographer. And so it's really embedded within the practice. And so I would say that at a young age, when I started spending so much time with our teacher, I mean, right away at age 8, I think, I wanted to be her. So whatever she was, I wanted to be.
Wasn't just a label. I love this idea of practitioner too. Yes. And so Ashwini, I'm curious, you had examples growing up. Was there ever an idea that you would be anything but a practitioner, much less a choreographer that you've become too?
Lots of times, honestly.
That's important to know. Yeah.
I am what you call a meanderer. I had a meandering path where Ranee and Aparna had a very straight line to what was very clearly, their path, especially Aparna, especially as once they met our teacher in India, who I always referred to as a Bharatanatyam artist, I think practitioner or artist, because she, as we say, she's poet, painter, sculptor, musician. She, like Ranee and Aparna too, creates original music to go with the choreography. So it really does encompass so many different facets of artistry that it almost puts you in a box to say choreographer. And so for me, following 6 years later, everything that, I was watching happening with Ranee and Aparna, just being 6 years younger, I kind of pushed against the path that was laid out. And also I was the only one born in the United States where there was just a lot of different influences happening in my life through just extracurricular activities or the mediums that I was interested in, from drawing, painting, singing, acting, always in the arts, but just a lot of different interests. But I always did dance. I always studied with Ranee and Aparna, and I danced all throughout college. I took a break for several years and moved to New York City, where I was a book publicist. And then there was just a really, really, really strong pull. There was something I felt was missing, something large that was missing. And that was a connection to family, a connection to India, a connection to performance, the feeling of carrying on a lineage that may end with our family if we didn't keep continuing that. So I moved back and focused really just on the craft of dance. And I became a student of Srimati Alarmirvali, our teacher, as well as Ranee and Aparna. And I worked for about 10 years on really being the best dancer I could be. And then the idea of choreography crept in the sense that I had ideas and themes that I was really interested in bringing out through this medium, and just had, decided that it would be an interesting way to examine the different ways we are American and and Indian and multicultural in a different way than Ranee and Aparna, because we all see that relationship to our homeland as different. So I guess I would say I also kind of feel like the word choreographer labels us in a way that's a little confining in some ways, but is also an amazing opportunity in this country that you have to go in directions as a choreographer and a dancer beyond just the stage, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. What's coming up for you, Ranee?
Interesting, because when we were studying with Valli, coming back to Minneapolis, I wanted literally everyone to see that style, that form, that language, not stay within the community. So I was choreographing. When I say choreographing, shifting from the classical, it was using that language for 10 years. There is not a single dancer in Minnesota that I haven't worked with. Jazz, modern, African, you name it. The deaf artist and myself doing transposed heads. And that actually brought my entry point into that choreography was because they would see the style embedded in that choreography. So then when we present our work as classical Bharatanatyam, they would come to see it, curious as to what is this form. So it was mainly done for audience development, to show that this art is capable of reaching out and meeting other cultures. But it was always... it was the work for my own body would be Bharatanatyam, but we would connect with different music, different themes that is universal. So after 10 years, it was, I think, when we did Sacred Earth. And at those 10 years was my teenage years, because I didn't have a teenage year. I was in India, and I was fascinated by music and performances and modern dance and so on. And then Aparna came to the company, and she literally said, "Mom, we should just go back to our roots completely. It can stand by itself." And then slowly it became, I quietened down trying to work with everybody else in different forms and different work. But I would always, that was an excuse for me. For some reason, I wasn't very comfortable doing it. Even though I enjoyed it, I felt our form actually fit much better with our own music. The stories, the poems. So Sacred Earth brought that deep-rooted Bharatanatyam dances instead of collaborating. We still collaborated.
Of course.
But we can talk about it later.
Yeah, I mean, hearing all of you reflect and also push against the sort of box, the labels that can be, is actually affirming for someone who runs a national center for choreography. And artists and audiences will sometimes reflect or joke back to me, "Oh, Christy, you say everything is choreography." And I do, because I think that it is not just a means to an end for making a dance. It is a way to engage with one's world. I'm curious, as makers and practitioners who happen to maybe practice choreographic ways of working and processing the world, where do you start when making a new work?
So in making a work, we start with the idea.
Okay.
And when I say the idea, we think of it much more as a concept that feels very connected to where we come from. So our South Indian culture, our perhaps Hindu philosophy, our musical traditions, wherever the that thematic thread may sit, but also has a universal relevance.
Okay.
And so it should feel timely and timeless. It should have a place, yet feel like it has every place. And that's what, it's not that we are in search for that particular value, but that is what we connect with. And so perhaps it is empathy towards the environment. And then how is that reflected in our texts or our musical traditions? And so then we start thinking about that, and then text comes next, or maybe text comes first from that, and then the theme comes, and then very specific texts are layered on that. Poetic texts that we use to make music. So then we work with a composer to make the score, and we work with instrumentation, but we are very involved with the music, obviously, because the musical modes, the rhythmic structures are what we interpret through our body. And so the quote unquote choreographer or creator is an important part of that process. And then we create the movement. But while we're doing that, we're also working with the scenic designer early on when we're thinking thematically about how can we in our work make the poetry of the body, poetry of word, of music, of the visuals come alive in concert.
I think I want to say, for example, Written in Water. Now the name came later, but the idea came from a board game, an Indian board game that I played as a kid. They played as a kid, and that was the first seed. How do we bring that through dance? And we talked about there are two kinds of games. I'll make this short. One is they belong to two different religious, not spiritual traditions. One is a particular god, another belongs to another god. And the game is played during a particular festival, all night. Adults played, children played, and it gives you these visual ideas. So we picked songs from the two traditions, and then it felt flat. So we decided, the Conference of the Birds is very similar idea. It's about ascension. The game board is you play 108 squares across. There are snakes and there are ladders. You go up and you come down. And it shows you, it's fate. It's you land, you go up or you go down. It's a reflection of your life in the world.
A real metaphor.
And absolutely the Conference of the Birds are going across 7 different landscapes to meet their leader and find that the leader is within each one. So, they are very similar, belonging to two completely different cultures. So what that brought about is to bring Amir El-Safar talking about music, because you don't want to do this whole two different myths, poetry in your own musical tradition. So we brought Amir El-Safar to compose that aspect of the movement. So, and then we had a visual artist from India to do the game board that was projected on the floor. They are all very involved. So the musically, the Carnatic classic, we always try to go for the best, excellent musicians, where we don't have to tell them, you have to do this or that. They are already rich in improvisation, because music is where the improvisation happens. So the singer, the vocalist, and Amir, his vocal, they started to jam. And then he played trumpet. And our musicians played the violin, and we had the drums, and so the drummer played for both.
You talk about dispelling the sort of myths of Bharatanatyam as if they are these ancient songs, but there is that timeliness, that liveness that comes up. And I'm thinking about the first project we worked on, Ashwini.
Let the Crows Come.
Let the Crows Come. What did you learn from working with different musicians about your own dance practice?
I just want to say one more thing about the music in general, which is that because there's so many emotional states constantly at play in Bharatanatyam, when you're choreographing, I'm saying that in quotes, you are also very specifically talking about what state of being or what emotional internal landscape that dancer is feeling. The music has to reflect that. The ragas that are selected or the melodic modes have to then reflect all of that. So the layering is beyond just the external body. There's a lot. We're always talking in dialogue about what is happening inside that then is translated back to the audience. So for Let the Crows Come, which was a piece that had Bharatanatyam, Gaga, which is an Israeli dance form, and African modern dance, started with wanting to work with those dance forms first, and especially the dancers, their personal interpretation of those forms.
Solana and Barrett, sure.
And we've all become very good friends since, which is really great also. I wanted to use the idea of being someone who's from India, who's multicultural and feels a different way, different times of the day, has to code switch, has to kind of figure out how to navigate a space that they're not specifically meant to be in, or sometimes not meant to be in. And so with the musical score, the Bharatanatyam section is Carnatic classical music. I used text, and Ranee was a big part of helping me with this score, and poetry to kind of craft that section. And then it's the same choreography translated onto these three forms. And you see the same thing three times. It looks different, but people are able to kind of make connections and seeing everybody as a human across the three. Each score is a reflection of the Carnatic score based on what the composer felt. So they might not sound the same at all, but they might have latched on to the rhythmic structures, or they might have latched on to the ragas. And so we had Brent Arnold, who's an electroacoustic cello, accompany Alana. And we had Jace Clayton, who goes by DJ Rupture, accompany Barrett. And so he did turntabling. So you had a real mix of sonic worlds. And then we each did solos with our own music, and then trios within each other's music. So you got to really see an expansion of each thing. But as Ranee mentioned, with her cross-cultural collaborative work, the styles were always maintained from body to body. Nobody was trying to do somebody else's style.
This feels more like a crafting and organizing of multiple entry points.
The way we consider all of the elements, I think entry points is exactly the phrase that we use as well, because being the practitioners of an art form that isn't known commonly here in the United States is that we have to provide multiple ways for people to not only have access, but to feel connected and to feel entitled to be connected, feel entitled to let go of the intellectual and emotionally connect. And dance can be tricky for people. And so there are many different ways to do that. But for us, the way we create that experience, I would say, is in collaboration. So even if we have an incredibly amazing, world-famous lighting designer, we don't just say, come and do your light design. We are always in a technical residency where we are looking at every moment. Even though we're dancing, we might be in the house for 6 days and then run back and forth or have someone else take our place.
Well, and Zoom conversations across many months beforehand.
Lots of work before you get in the space
just
together.
As in dance, there is so much layered meaning and metaphor and symbolism to the movement and to what you're hearing and the poetry from the poetry. Light design and set design has that as well. And we want to acknowledge that, and we want to have all of those art forms be in very meaningful conversation. And I think that as artists, I will say, I think the word collaboration gets thrown around a lot. And it means, again, like choreography, it means something different to everybody. And I think the danger that we feel often is when you give a list of art forms, you don't want it to feel like it's just it's a free-for-all.
Or a laundry list just to, like ticking off.
One of our deep values is rigor. And we want to make sure that every artist who is invited to be in that process feels that they can maintain the rigor of what they've devoted their lives to.
I'm glad you brought up rigor as one of your core values, because what I wanted to circle back to is you talked about dance is tricky for a lot of people. And maybe the invitation can be, this is something to get closer to your culture. Although I also recall one of our first conversations, Ashwini, you were like, just because you might book, the Ragamala Dance Company does not mean the Southeast Asian community is going to show up. It could be if that is part of the invitation too, but it is not a foregone conclusion. And so coming back to like dance is tricky for people, I find we can learn so much, and you've performed in front of lots of audiences, but sitting among an audience to what they respond to. How would you define virtuosity in your movement practice?
Well, I can talk about it I think it has taken, I've started dancing in the United States from 28. I'm 73.
Yes, ma'am.
And I have not stopped dancing, but I feel now I feel I can say I have agency over expression and emotion. Valli's style of dance is extremely physical. And I started that late. I started that at the age of 28 or 29. But I did it for years. And then the expressing your emotions in a way that it's real. Valli always says, my emotions are real. It's not fake. To be completely involved with what you are telling, the story, the feeling of it, how you portray your gestures, and how you look at something and recognize that thing and show your emotion at that thing and at that time communicate with the audience. Then there are 4 things that are happening. It's not mime. It's not like once upon a time, but you're literally seeing everything you are dancing and you're feeling it. And I think that's virtuoso. And I'm scared to say that, but I think I have arrived at a place when my feelings are absolutely true.
I would say that I 100%, 200% agree, and we all strive for that. We're working towards it. And our teacher says, it's just a key. You just have to, she said, when I was in my whatever decade, I found the key. And so we keep talking about this key, right? But it sounds so simple to find the key. The key is magic, and it takes so much work. I would also say there is, if you haven't been able to tell so far, our teacher, Alamil Valli, really is the highest bar for us, right? And she keeps getting better and better and better. And so it's this incredible, amazing, humbling example. And so, but all through life, we obviously have rhythmic rigor, we have physicality, which is really beautiful. But it can feel empty if it doesn't have a very natural joyfulness. I think this idea of being able to reveal yourself is the most virtuosic thing you can do. And I think that's what people respond to. And to connect this idea of music to virtuosity, I don't know if we mentioned, we almost always dance with live music on stage. That relationship is extremely important.
It heightens the honesty and authenticity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Honesty, authenticity,
yes. Immediacy is a great word. Yeah.
And so all of those things come together, and it's again another entry point, but also this complete symbiosis. And so I think a dance artist who is able to show the music through their body, or at least honestly tries, and shows that joyfulness and whatever emotion that's happening, that is what we strive for.
One thing that we're lucky to have, which is encompassed by both what Ranee and Aparna said, is a sense of striving and a sense of something grander than ourselves, a sense of a spiritual seeking in every year of dance life. And so it's just so motivating to have that, Ranee's still going strong, still improving, still, so magnetic on stage. That's an amazing example to have. So it really keeps us realizing that the label of virtuoso, it keeps gaining.
Right. And it is almost a fulfilling cycle and continuing to both what you put out and then filling you back up to expand. You want to add one more thing? And then I have one last question.
Because it's a solo form.
Yes.
And so in this solo form, each one emotes differently. So it never gets boring. Because the way I emote will be different from the way Aparna or Ashwini emotes. The age, all of that. It's like real life coming to as a dance on stage. So we have that. And since we are also creating work for our own body, our own bodies, then you know where to go. What is your goal? All that can be achieved.
Yes. And there's so much reverence and acknowledgement for your teacher through this conversation. And I think that also brings us back to what the term choreographer can also often represent an implied hierarchical approach. And what I heard so much in our conversation today is you're like, oh, we're constantly becoming and practicing and looking, yes, to a teacher, but less from what is very typical in the West, which is the hierarchical, I am this choreographer, this director, which implies power, agency, and responsibility. But there's so much that is also carried from within as you're like leading in and out. Then I'm going to challenge you for our last question. We have a lot of listeners who are trying to figure out how to navigate a creative life. And whether it is something you've received from your teacher, what you've received from each other, or if you want to make up your own piece of advice, I would like to invite you each to offer what is your best advice for someone trying to build out their own creative life.
I would say never quit. If that's what you want to do and you have got into that, don't question yourself as to, shall I do that too? Or should I change if you know deeply what you want to do, never look back and just keep going. Failures, they are part of your life. Should take it all as stepping stones to success.
Oh, I would say that people should get very comfortable with being their multiple selves within one body. So when you say that you're a choreographer or a dancer or you have a teacher, I mean, we are students. And being a student means a lot. It is actually the best state to be in because you're learning, you're accepting, and you shouldn't let your ego get in the way. But also, if you're leading a company, you have to make decisions, and you're that person too. And so you should stand with your convictions. And so you have to be multiple things. It's like being a mother and a daughter. You are that and you have to realize that no bit of advice or criticism defines who you are, but it's all a part of who you are.
Well, I was going to say something sort of similar in that it's really important to balance this idea of a sense of humility and a sense of agency. You don't know everything. You never will, but also you don't know nothing. And so you have to balance that similarly to what Aparna said.
The simultaneity of both.
Yes. And then I also want to say that the personal experience that you have to be observant, and the personal experience you have in the world will bring out the universal if it's done in the right way. So that's just something to always draw from, I think, in order to be that authentic artist, is take from personal experience in order to make what you create authentic.
Inside the Dancers Studio Conversation Series is produced by NCCAkron and supported in part by Audio-Technica, a global audio manufacturer with U.S. headquarters in Northeast Ohio. Our podcast program is produced by Lisa Niedermeyer of Handmade Future Studio. Rahsaan Cruz is our audio engineer, with transcription by Arushi Singh, theme music by Flaco Torres, and cover art by Micah Kraus. Special thanks to Laura Alicott, Nikisha Moore-Dunson, Dante Fields, Jen Garlando, and Mary Claire Hulbert. To learn more about NCCAkron, please visit us online at nccakron.org. and follow us on Instagram or Facebook at NCCAkron. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we encourage you to subscribe on your favorite podcast streaming platform by searching for Inside the Dancers Studio. Thanks for listening, and stay curious.